Republic of Thieves by Scott Lynch is the third entry in the Gentleman Bastard series. And what can I say besides, I'm just disappointed. With such a exemplary first entry into the series, I had really high hopes, and it hasn't been able to capture that balance of character and engaging plot ever since in the next two books. I just gotta say, it had the potential just like Red Seas Under Red Skies, but it did not capitalize on that. I'm going to jump in here before I get into the real depth of the story and say like and subscribe if you enjoy. The next book series I'm reading is Joe Abercrombie's First Law because I liked his interviews with YouTubers. Leave me other book suggestions in the comments. Thanks. On to the video. The interesting dynamic of having a political election against somebody who's just as skilled as you is something that really hooked me at the start, just like having a pirate adventure. But the execution of it, the stakes felt low. The villains were not there because it was essentially Locke romancing the villain. And the election felt like it didn't really matter. In regards to the flashbacks, it was fine, but definitely the weakest of the three books. I think the whole Baldazzi and play dynamic really was not a great setting to base the Locke-Sabetha romance off of, because it really did not expand on the conflict and why Locke didn't want to speak her name for a long time and how it connected to the present day. It was essentially just the same retelling in two different time points. It was like they're relearning the lessons. And Sabetha going back and forth between, oh, I want to be around you, I can't be around you, simply because of the information that Patience, the Bonds Magi, reveals. It just felt super conflicting because it felt like she was going back on her thought process multiple times over, let alone learning these same lessons in the past. Jean got a huge role in the last book with his romance with Ezri, but he takes a major backseat in this book. There's a few times where him and Sabetha try to spark up their friendship again, but that is not really followed through about the awkwardness of having two of your friends date and you being a third wheel. It's not really explored fully. He's just a super supportive friend, and there's nothing more to it besides that. No real conflict between him losing attention from Locke or Sabetha being awkward around him. It just kind of comes together as it all works out perfectly. The election I was very excited about to begin with. This is a time for Locke and Jean to battle against somebody with the same exact training as them and see how they match up against somebody that knows all of their tactics. And at this point, you think Sabetha is angry at Locke and they had some breaking apart, and it just turns out that she changed his game because Locke wanted to keep everything the same and he was a natural Kappa. Or not Kappa, but Garista. And that was just a disappointing conflict after having this whole setup of I can't speak her name, don't talk about her, we had a falling out, and just for it to come back and Locke's all heads over heels for her. I wanted the rivalry between them to be more aggressive and then slowly break down instead of almost immediately breaking down after the boat kidnapping. And the election itself was so inconsequential, it did not matter at all. The last thing that happened with the Bonds Magi coup was just so weakly set up and coming out of nowhere. It's oh, something interesting finally after 500 pages. And then the book's over. And then you get the epilogue with the Falconer coming back and murdering his mother, which you're oh, wow, this is really cool. I wish it hadn't taken this long to get to this. The relationship with Locke and Sabetha is the main part of the book, but it was not as well done as Jean and Locke's falling out and coming together in the last book. I kind of just skipped over the beginning part with Locke being sick to set it up in the first place, but the whole involvement of the Bonds Magi and them healing and pulling out the poison, I thought that was a very nice piece of world building, and I don't want to be fully negative on this book because it is enjoyable. It was just a big letdown, I have to say. In terms of world building, I feel just like Tel Varar, this was not a fleshed out city. Carthane felt very empty. The culture was not the same. I think Camor had an advantage because the flashbacks both took place in Camor and also the real-time story took place in Camor. So you could combine that to add more depth to the overall surroundings. But in the past two books, the flashbacks take place in a separate place than the main events. And so the city is left feeling kind of weak and barely fleshed out. And I really wanted more depth to it because these are unique places with unique setups and ways of adaptation to magic in Carthage and different factors in Tel Varar. It just felt very surface level, like here's what you need to know, don't worry about the details. Whereas Camor was very deep and fleshed out, especially with the iterations of the Italian gangs and the different hierarchies. These places do not have the same level of depth. Big reveal in the book is Locke is actually this prodigy bonds magi, but transferred into his body when the Catchfire plague broke out and he was the one child to walk out. He got switched, he lost the gift, all of that. And there's no really previous setup besides him not liking the bonds magi to make this impactful. And the really only repercussions is that Sabetha is weirded out. Jean doesn't give a single fuck. And that just didn't feel like it should hit in the reveal. Like, there should have been some setup between all three books about a figure of some sorts that Locke has a connection with, versus this just being a random dude that was good at magic. I mean, there was something revealed to Sabetha, but there's no clues that I can put together from previous hints in the books that it would be something so drastic to make this twist good. It just felt not set up well and kind of boring. And this is by no means an explanation for how ingenious Locke is in the way he does things, which I am perfectly happy with. I would kind of hate if his skills were because of a past life of who he is, but there's really no point to revealing this. It doesn't add anything for me. Overall, I want to say I'm not totally negative on this book. It was an enjoyable enough read. I read about my 100 pages a day for the first 400 and then petered out, and it took me an extra couple days to finish it off. It was enjoyable, but yet again disappointing compared to what came before. Like and subscribe if you enjoy these reviews. I'm moving on to the First Law trilogy with Joe Abercrombie. Leave me other book suggestions. Thanks.